on queerness or gender and using the correct pronouns for people. And it's a little hard because I'm also, like during the introduction has been said, I'm also not from the US or North America, and English is not my first language. And I try my best to keep learning, keep unlearning, and be respectful to other people. So I think that's something that I struggle a lot with in everyday interactions, not just professionally, but like personally as well. How I deal with those situations, usually I have a group of my support system, whether they're also queer folks or allies, that I go to for just thinking through situations, like walking through it just to vent or process what just happened and try to figure out what the next steps might be. So sometimes I do like to take the opportunity and have conversations with people, like more on my pronouns and that they should use correct pronouns for me. And before I send that email, I usually have my trusted allies like read it over and give me feedback on, like, I want to be assertive, but I also don't want to be mean or aggressive. Like again, I'm trying to take this as a learning opportunity and be nice and understanding to other folks as well. And yeah, that's usually how I go about them.
That's really powerful. I'm curious, and it's really wonderful to hear about how you're navigating that. And I'm curious for you, Seoyeon, is it like a two strikes sort of situation? Like when does it reach the point when it's time to send the email?
I think I try to do it as soon as I can. So
Mm,
because I've also heard that people would prefer to be corrected like earlier on rather than keep using the wrong pronouns and like 3 months later I'm like, actually this whole time you've been using the wrong pronouns for me. So if I feel like the other person is open to that feedback, because I don't do it to every single person, it also depends on my energy level, what kind of interaction level I have with the folks. Sometimes I'm just super tired, I'm like, I can't deal with this. But usually when I expect close relationships or close proximity to these people, and I know that they will hopefully take it in a positive way, then that's when I usually do it. I haven't sent like the alarming, like, please let's do something about this person because this person is making me extremely uncomfortable type of email yet. So that's good. But yeah, so earlier on in the relationship is when I usually try to talk about it.
I think that's wise because it's for folks that this may be new to, they're already breaking a social habit, right? They're trying to break a social habit or are learning how to do that. And to give that information to them earlier is only going to help them break that habit with then when they look at Seoyeon and then they have an association that runs through their brain and then they can make that adjustment and then it becomes second nature, but it takes practice. It takes practice. Were you openly identifying with your pronouns at Cummins out of the gate, or was that a journey for you as you've been at Cummins?
Yeah, my journey with my pronouns are very interesting. So when I first started at Cummins, which was 2021 summer, I started as an intern. At the time, I was using she, her pronouns exclusively. And then during the internship is actually coincidentally when I started questioning my own gender identity in my personal life. And that's when I started using she, they pronouns with the people that were closest to me. I was just starting to see how I feel about it, questioning if I am cis women. So at the time during the internship, even though I was trying to figure it out on my own personally, I didn't feel the need to change or come out with my gender pronouns at work because it still felt true for other people to use she, her pronouns for me at the time. My internship ended, and then I had my last semester in college, fall 2021, and that is when I fully transitioned to exclusively using they, them pronouns. And I knew I was coming back full time to Cummins in February 2022 to the same team. So that meant coming out to the same people that used she, her pronouns for me, which is a whole nother thing when it's like new people, I start fresh with they, them pronouns. So I was extremely nervous. I was trying to figure out if I should just use she, her pronouns at work and not worry about coming out and constantly correcting people. It did not feel true to me. So I was really a little bit stressed out trying to figure out what would be the right move for me. So I come back my first day full time with the same manager. He sent out a like extended team welcome email on my behalf and used they them pronouns for me without consulting me. And I still have a video of me crying reading that email because I sent it to all my friends and family who knew that I was non-binary because it made me so, so, so happy and relieved. And this was such a pivotal moment in my career in general and at Cummins that I have somebody backing me up to just be who I am fully. And later that day, I had my one-on-one with my manager, and he asked, like, I saw it in your school email. Was that okay for me to use they, them pronouns for you? And I told him the same thing that I told y'all. Like, I cried. It was so wonderful. Thank you so much. So from day one, coming back full time, I put they, them pronouns everywhere. And it wasn't even a question in my mind that I had to hide or be scared to be actually just be fully who I am at Cummins. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I am really, really grateful that that was my experience.
I love that. That's so beautiful. Yeah, it gives me hope when I hear stories like this, and I identify and relate a lot with your story because with Power to Fly, it's like where I started using he they more than in my personal life first, because it was like, oh, this is like I'm literally leading talks about how this is okay. Maybe it's, and I started to like, I had my own awakening, we're all humans. And it had been a process earlier in my life, but then being immersed in a supportive work culture that was really walking the walk on that aspect really gave me that psychological safety to just do it. And there was no conversation about it. It was just it was normalized the second it was the second I decided, and I love hearing that is your experience too with your team. Did
Yeah, and
yeah, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add that when I was an intern, that's when the Cummins HR system introduced the non-binary option into the HR system.
Oh
And
wow.
and that's exactly when I was like trying to come out to myself as genderqueer as well. And that was one of the biggest factors that led me to come back to make the decision that Cummins is going to be the good environment for me.
Wow. How serendipitous and lovely. Hmm. Someone asked, does your company or team manager offer inclusive language training or any information on pronoun usage now that that's part of it?
Yeah, so actually at Cummins, we have what is called we call it LGBTQ plus safe leader training. So this is a training not just to people of the community, but allies as well, who's willing to come and learn. So it breaks down and goes over, our treatment at work policy, right? So it's zero tolerance at Cummins when it comes to discrimination on any grounds. But then they also, remind you of that, but it goes more into depth about, just what does the letters mean? What about gender? What's the difference between gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, biological sex, things like that. And then it goes through scenarios that you might be able to experience at work so that and then we'll pair people off into breakout rooms, have them kind of discuss it, come back together, see what everyone comes up with as well. So it's been very successful. I just did one here in Michigan a couple months ago that went over very well. And I'm finding that a lot of new people leaders are taking interest in this because it's kind of ingrained in our culture with this about D&I and acceptance and things like that, that they recognize that, okay, if I'm going to be a people leader, I should probably take this because I'm unfamiliar. And so we also created, it's a safe space. We don't record it. So we allow everyone to be able to kind of express freely their views, but of course be respectful. But they recognize that I may have people on my team that may identify with this community, and I want to be respectful, and I want to be able to understand them and, be a better ally. So that's something that we do have, and it's open to everyone.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so as we are discussing intersectionality and also there's so many great questions coming in the chat. I'm going to try to do as many as I can. And as you can see, the time flies. So I'm gonna moving on to the next topic. Obviously, I could do a whole hour on pronouns and that section, but there's more to discuss, my friends. Okay, so navigating multiple identities. Seoyeon, I think you have 4 or 5 just in your bio, that we were talking about. So how do you navigate feeling like you have an identity when you have, how do you navigate feeling of one identity when you have so many intersections? What is that experience like for you at work and in your personal life?
I struggle a lot with this. So this is such a great question. I think I just want to say that it is hard. I feel like it is hard, especially when some of those identities have elements that kind of go against each other, if that makes sense. So me being from a very collectivistic culture, which is Korean culture, I have had such a hard time trying to figure out coming out to my family. And Korea is, I want to say it's growing and evolving, but in general, there is still a lot of homophobia and transphobia and queerphobia present. So when I came out to myself, I was struggling a lot with feeling like I need to be removed from my Korean identity or my Asian identity. And then if I go to the queer communities, then there is also like racism within the queer community, and there's also very specific queer culture that I might not be as aware because I didn't grow up in the North American context. So it is sometimes hard to feel like I belong in a very specific group. So I kind of let go of this idea that there will be this perfect group of people that will understand and know and share all my wonderful but different identities. And if I find groups of people that share like at least 2, then it's like wonderful. You get so much of like me being an immigrant and what it's like to live in the US while being queer, or you're neurodivergent and you're also from a collectivistic culture, like what it's like to live in that realm. So I feel like kind of having those multiple communities that get part of me have been really helpful. But yeah, it's been difficult to embrace like some of those identities that might have parts of them that is hard with my other intersecting identities.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Keivin?
Yeah, I share similar sentiments with Seoyeon as well. Growing up, so I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and so having this knowing in my brain that I'm gay, but being taught these things was not okay, was a struggle for me. And when I came to accept that, it was to the point, even after I came out, that I still felt this struggle, right? And so and it made me question a lot of things. When I did come out, I have this other identity, right? I'm also a son. So not understanding how this identity, but I'm also a son of my mom and my stepdad, and not being to accept both of those at the same time, it broke my heart. However, I had my father, actually, my biological father came in and kind of took me under his wing. So, and honestly, if it wasn't for him, uh, I'm not sure what would happen, to be honest. And so there's that. And so I also talk about also being Black, right? So when I'm in Black spaces, obviously I'm accepted by my race, but my sexuality might come up after that. And so especially within Black community, there's a lot of homophobia within that. So knowing when to navigate that sometimes could be pretty difficult, right? Because there's this stereotype of being masculine that's kind of out there when it comes to Black men, especially with their Black mothers and things like that. So that poses a struggle. It's something that I'm still kind of dealing with now. And then when I'm in other spaces, right, that's non-Black, what shows up first? My race shows up first. So now I have to deal with that first. And then now I have to deal with my queer identity on top of that, depending on who the space is. So sometimes it could be hard. You hate to have to water yourself down for communities, but sometimes it is safe. But like Seoyeon, I try to find spaces where I can kind of embrace all of me at the same time. I think that's really cool that we have we have these employee resource groups where you can embrace all these identities, right? So I lead the Pride ERG. I'm on our Cummins Black Network ERG. I'm on the women's ERG as an ally because women are the reason why I feel like I'm the employee that I am today. My father and brother are both vets, so I'm a son of a vet and a brother of a vet. So I have all these things that I try to be a part of, but it does get, like science said, when they clash, that's where it gets difficult.
Yeah. And that we're the sum of our parts, right? We're multitudes of identities. We're not just one thing at any given moment. And navigating that space, like you were just speaking to, Keivin, it takes judgment sometimes. And that I also internally will have conflict about, like, am I trying to pass this straight right now? Like, what am I doing? Because like, see this like white guy with a mustache walk in and they'll be like, hey, what's up, man? I'm like, hi. It's like, So, but then there's other times, yeah. So there's other times when it's just like, I'm just going to read the room and I don't need to prove anything to anyone, is like how I can feel okay with my choices. Like I'm not hiding, but I also can be kind to myself in these difficult moments, as opposed to like, I need to get on my soapbox, or I should have done this, or I should have said that, or I should have taught that person. It's like, do I though every time? Because that is exhausting, right? Like I don't know that I have the bandwidth to always do that and do my job at the same time, right? So it can be hard. It can be really hard. We all have our different pieces. So you're both getting a lot of love in the chat right now. Thank you both for sharing your stories. Very moving and motivational. Smiley face, lots of likes on that. Sending hugs with a little hug emoji, which is maybe my favorite one, to Seoyeon and anyone who has had or is currently having this internal struggle. Continue to be you, be great, and sharing your story with the world. # you are amazing. Talk about like also for Seoyeon into marketing. That's a really good post and copy right there. Hello. Let's see. Okay, questions from the chat. I'm going to try to pop in. We have a little under 30 minutes left, friends. So keep your questions coming. This is great. We keep your questions coming. Okay, he's got dad jokes. Or either of the guests first generation in terms of higher education, first to go to or finish college or grad school? And does that ever factor into your identity pressures? Whew, hot question, hot takes. Any identification with this question, either of you?
So yes, I am first to go to grad school as well too. So mine's interesting. So I grew up with my mom and my stepdad. Like I said earlier, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, and so secular education really was not pushed. It was not I don't want to say it was frowned upon, but it definitely wasn't a priority. And so of course I did that route. And so growing up with that at the time when I started, I was still not complete. Probably was my freshman year, and when I decided to go, it was a lot. I got a lot of pushback on that. But as far as like my identity being queer and things like that, it never affected that. But that was like the only time that I've kind of experienced a little bit of something like that. So
thank you for sharing that. Let's see what else is in the chat here. Rob, thank you, Rob, for dropping in how you can connect with our speakers. There's their links as well. We had intersectionality is like a puzzle. If one part is missing, it's not complete. Same goes for us. If we can't be our full selves, then a part of us is missing. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, and thank you. I love your personality too. Okay, let's see what else we got in here. Okay, let me go back to my handy dandy sheet here because there's so many great questions that I'll sift through in the chat as well. Oh, here's a good one. So challenges within the community, which we were touching on a little bit earlier. So how do you navigate opposing views within the LGBTQIA plus community at work? I'll let popcorn style either can jump in.
I can start with this one. I was thinking a lot about this question, like what the person who wrote this question might have been referring to. What comes to my mind is like racism within the queer community, transphobia, discrimination towards non-binary folks who don't fit the binary gender categories, by erasure or discrimination towards people who are attracted to more than one set of sex assigned at birth or gender. I think it is hard, but like we talked about, at least at Cummins, there is no question that any discrimination towards any of that will be tolerated. So I feel like having that layer of protection makes me feel much more comfortable navigating potential situations that may arise. So far, I have not personally experienced any opposing views or pushback within the queer community, which I'm very thankful for. And I think, like we talked about the Safe Leader training or any resources that the Pride ERG has been putting out there, I think has helped educating folks and hopefully having people stay curious and be open to learning new things that might not be aligned with what they already know, because the world is always evolving. New identities are always like coming out, or we learn about them, or they come into the light more. So I think that has been really helpful. And I remember I actually helped with adding more genderqueer sections into the Safe Leader training last year, and that was wonderful for me to just see more emphasis on having more understanding about gender within Cummins, and hopefully that will help this type of potential opposing situations in the future.
That's awesome that you've been a part of the change. How does that feel?
It feels really good. I think at first when I started full-time at Cummins, I was like, there's no way that I'm the only genderqueer person in this like multiple thousand people organization.
Right.
And I think it helped that I was vocal about it. Like, I think it helped that I was vocal about the people that I was meeting with and was like, yeah, I want to find more community. And the Pride ERG definitely helped. Now I know quite a few people who are also genderqueer. And it's been wonderful to see the organization, like obviously no one's perfect and the organization is perfect and we're just constantly growing together, but it's the willingness to grow that really made me feel welcomed and feel like I can be fully myself. And I think somebody said that in the chat as well, like coming to any situations fully as myself will always be the best case scenario.
I love that. The willingness to change. That's beautiful. Keivin, how about you with opposing views, different views within the community?
Yeah. So I mean, at work, probably I could say I haven't experienced that, but just kind of just to piggyback with Science says. So, we have the safe leader training where we allow when people take that training to, allow them to be able to express themselves. But I always say this, you can ask whatever question you want, right? You can be curious, as long as it's coming from a place of love and understanding, then we can talk about it. If there's no negative connotation coming behind it, because I understand some people just don't know and they just want and they genuinely don't know, and that is totally fine. But if you're, as long as you're coming to here wanting to understand, wanting to learn, wanting to understand, and it's coming from a place of love, then I'm willing to have the conversation, whether it is opposing, because maybe you just need to meet someone like me or a Seoyeon or you, Hunter, to kind of help them, open their eyes to something more. And so that's typically how I approach it. Try not to get on the defensive when someone is having having a view that might be directly opposed to, how I see things. Like, try to see where they're coming from. Is it genuine? And then kind of handle it from there.
Yeah. Someone asked earlier about, because I love what you're saying there, Keivin, about if someone's coming with genuine curiosity, and if it is coming from a place of compassion, that we want to receive that, right? We want, this person has the willingness to change, right? And so we want to help them with that. Have there been times when perhaps someone has come to either of you wanting to learn more, or maybe trying to be an ally to help other people in the room, that maybe so you don't have to do all of the lifting, all of the teaching? Is there anything like that with either of you with allyship?
I love to talk about this because I have great examples and experiences. I feel like the most, I don't know, like easy things that everyone can do is like adding their pronouns on Zoom, email, Teams, whatever platforms your organization uses. It is like an immediate positive reinforcement for me that you are a safe person to talk about my pronouns, or kind of, yeah, like I see you as an ally. I don't know what you identify as, but I immediately see you and feel like, oh, there's at least somebody here that understands my pronouns. So I feel like that can be like an easy act of allyship. The things that I really appreciate is, like you said, Hunter, sometimes I get really tired of correcting people when they use the wrong pronouns for me. And especially for me, like when it happens in person, it's even harder for me, especially when I see that there's no negative intention behind it. It can be a little more awkward. If we have a free-flowing conversation, it can be a little awkward for me to stop and correct somebody. So I really appreciate it when people around me actually correct the other person instead for me. And I have like more than a handful of people that I know and at Cummins who does that for me, even when I'm not in the room, which is like such a big thing. And so that's an example of advocating for others and standing up for them even when they're not present. And which is like kind of tricky line to walk when you're trying to advocate, but also you're not taking up space that is not yours. So, yeah, trying your best to shed light and amplify the voices of the people who have that experiences would be my best advice for allyship, which I also do for other folks that I don't share that identities with.
Yeah, I love that. Keivin, as you were saying earlier, you're a part of one of the women's ERG groups as an ally. Are there ways that you show up as an ally for folks that you'd like to share, and perhaps some ways that other people show up for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the things that I definitely, if I notice, like, for example, not only am I gay and black, but I'm also a man too, right? So there's some privileges that come with that. And so, especially in meetings, if I notice that, and it can happen frequently, where sometimes women or the women identifying people just kind of get overlooked. You know, they don't get a chance to talk or being overtalked. So I will quickly step in and say, okay, well, let's give this person a chance. They've been trying to get a talk. How about we let them have the floor this time? So that's just like one of the small ways that I do to, when I notice things right away. And if I can, I'll try to kind of correct it in the moment or try to fix it in the moment to show that, hey, we need to give support to this person as well, because, you know, some people do things naturally. And then for me, so what I find the beauty of the ERG, because it includes allies as well. So we have this one particular person who now has become part of our leadership team, and we're doing a lot of educating. So we have three pillars that we're trying to accomplish with our ERG: education, community service, and then of course social. And so with the education piece, so me and my other colleague, we've been kind of leading the charge on a few things, but she decided to step up as an ally. She said, you know what, we have Pride coming up. I think we should do an education project on just like with flags. Let's understand that while we're going into it, because we know that we've had a lot of questions surrounding it last year when we were at the booth. So how about I take the lead on this? Because I know you both have been kind of doing a lot of the educating. So I'll go ahead and do the research. If you all can just kind of fine tune it, and then I will step up and lead this conversation. So which I which I appreciate it, because it does get tiring after a while. So I definitely appreciated that.
Yeah, those are really wonderful to hear. I've heard in some of our chats here, I believe Sienna Brown does this one, who's amazing. If you don't know who Sienna is, she's part of our Power to Fly team. And I highly recommend you follow her and go to any events that she is leading, because she's amazing. And there can be moments when, this is one I think I picked up from her, when someone says something perhaps unintentionally, let's hope unintentionally offensive. Like, when you said blank, I know you didn't mean blank. Would you like to tell me what you were trying to say there? And it's giving someone an opportunity to be like, I'm just gonna check you on what you said here, but also give you the benefit of the doubt, give you an opportunity to rephrase it. And if you're gonna double down on what you said the first time, then we're gonna have a different conversation. It's like the way you get to set that up. And that is not necessarily an easy thing to go into, but it's like, if we are to have the bandwidth to like engage in that way, if that's one of those moments, that is something that can be quite powerful. It can be, most people are not intentionally trying to be inappropriate. I think it's very rare, luckily. Maybe I'm an optimist in that way, but it is an opportunity to give a chance to grow, right? Instead of letting it go under the rug and then they just don't even know, and then they're just going to do it again, right? Because if yes, that is a very good point. Pushback also varies a lot on regionally. Yeah. Seoyeon, would you like to speak to that actually? Because we talked a little bit about the different regions a little bit when we first met up.
For sure. Sometimes, because I think a lot about the cultural context, regional context, language context as well, when I'm talking about pronouns or queerness. Sometimes I correct people and they nod when they actually didn't fully register what I said, or they act like I just didn't say anything. whether that is like, I don't know what the intentions are behind it. I want to assume that it's because they didn't understand it and they don't want to talk about it more, or they just want to ignore it and move on because it makes them uncomfortable. So I think, and sometimes like people are very acceptive and sometimes apologize and move on, or take this as a learning opportunity and they do their own research, or they want to have additional conversation with me on certain things, which I try my best to always welcome when I have the capacity to. So I think working in an international organization, there are like a lot of times when I work with people whose English is not their first language. They have lived most of their life in a culture where queerness is not talked about as much compared to North America, and they are still living there. So I try my best to give people the grace and understanding that when I do correct them and it doesn't change as fast as I might want it to, or I might have to do it multiple times and there's not much progress being made. It is hard. It is definitely hard. And I hope that this doesn't happen to anybody. But yeah, I think that is something that I also want to be mindful as somebody who also has family back in Korea, still living there, and they have a really hard time understanding gender and queer languages or terms or identity terms because it's not well translated into their Korean language that they use every day. So I try my best to be understanding, even though it is hard.
That's fascinating. Are you, and please call me out if this is a very ignorant question, are there new words like being created, like how we are finding new language? Like we've invented some new things, but I think the more cultural adoption with they, them, it's like grammatically different, but it's a word that people understand. What's going on that you've noticed?
For sure. I think so I mainly use non-binary as my gender identity when I talk about it in English context. And then I realized when I say it in Korean, because a lot of the times, like these days, we just use the English words directly in Korean context. People didn't get it. Like even my most like even my most given my friends who have like very much access to North American context and like culture and everything, who is fluent in English like me, they didn't understand what that was. So I was like, but there's gotta be people who are also like non-binary or genderqueer in Korea too. And I realized they use genderqueer more as the main identity term that they use. So when I talk to people in Korean, I just use genderqueer and they have a better time like understanding it, or they're like, oh, I think I've heard of it somewhere.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. No, it's
That's really
fascinating.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just language is evolving continually. It always has, right? You know, and now we're in this new shift. I love thinking about that on a global scale. My brain makes me wish I spoke more languages. I'm like, I'm stuck in my little English box. I want to get out. Okay, we have just a few minutes left, friends. So we're going to go into the lightning round in just a moment. But before we do, if you have any burning questions that we haven't touched on, now is the time. Speaking of evolving language and terms, this is a very interesting question that someone asked. Can either of you speak to how the definition of professionalism is evolving in terms of inclusion? So like what is professional when we're bringing different identities of ourselves, this intersectionality, to our work environment? How, Keivin, can you speak to, because you're part of a bunch of different ERGs and you work with a lot of people, what is that line between what professionalism is now and maybe what it was viewed as, I don't know, 15 years ago?
Yeah, no, I thought that was whoever asked it, that was a great question. So I guess professionalism traditionally, right, it was really associated with what specific behaviors, specific appearances. But now that like everything evolving, encompassing inclusivity and diversity is really professionals is really just recognizing that varied perspectives and backgrounds really is what enrich the workplace. And so when you kind of shift that mindset of, a professional to that, it really allows people to really just express their authentic selves. And this fosters a more of a diverse, I think, environment, talents, and that way those type of ideas can really thrive, in my opinion. And so and thinking of professionals in this way, it really contributes to people bringing them whole selves to work. So it's really just getting away from that whole, this is how you have to look, this is how you have to be, but really just embracing all these differences that people bring. And let's think of the bigger picture. We want the company to succeed. And how do we do that? We need people to bring themselves to work. And when they bring themselves to work, they actually can work better. And overall, that creates a better work environment. And now the company is now producing better because we have all these people who are being themselves, being comfortable, working harder, having a good time, and now now the company is going to succeed as well too.
I love that. Well said. Thank you. Okay, friends, lightning rounds for these last 3 questions. So let's kick it off with you, Seoyeon. How would you describe the culture at Cummins in one word?
I want to say growing. I think I used this word a couple times before, but like I said, yes, Cummins is also not the perfect utopia organization, just like anywhere else. But I feel like we're constantly trying to be better, to really working towards making a better work environment for literally everyone.
Oh, great. I love that. Growing. That's wonderful. How about you, Keivin?
I would use collaborative. I think is very good at, I think, to both extremes. We could be almost too collaborative where sometimes it's hard to make a decision, but the fact that Cummins wants the opinions of everyone who needs to be in the room. So like the fact that Seoyeon and I was able to do this, right? Our TA strategy team brought us in to be able to kind of come to this platform, to be able to kind of speak here. So I think that's one of the good things. It's finding that balance, but Cummins is a super collaborative company. I appreciate that.
Love that. Collaborative and growing. That's so great. What's your favorite part about working at Cummins, Seoyeon?
I kind of wanted to connect this with the question that was pre-submitted, which was like, why do we have to talk about sexuality in the context of work? And I think for me, it's the fact that I'm not scared to talk about who I am and who I am as a person. And that's not something that I want to hide or be nervous about talking about it. Sometimes things come up in just conversations. So it's really about giving the people the choice to share or not of whatever they want to share about their lives. And at Cummins, I don't feel nervous. Like if I say something, will I be discriminated against? Will I be passed up for opportunities? Will people like try to shun me away or avoid me in certain situations? I don't feel any of that. So that's my favorite part, is just being able to be who I am and not be scared.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for bringing back that question that I missed. I really appreciate that. Keivin, how about you?
So I think my favorite part of working for Cummins is really all of the D&I initiatives that Cummins have. So I mentioned that I'm the HBCU Engagement Leader. So my leader, shout out to Tracy Kidd, started the HBCU program. And so this actually gives me the opportunity to mirror 2 things. I have a passion for talent acquisition, and of course I have a passion for D&I, and I get to kind of bring those together in order to kind of bring in diverse talent through our talent acquisition strategy partners to Cummins so they can kind of enjoy the benefits like I do here. And like Seoyeon, I able to be myself. I can lead programs like this. We have support to be on panels such as this as well. So those would be my favorite things about working for Cummins.
Awesome. And in our last moments here, for both of you, what are your top tips for someone who is potentially interviewing for a role at Cummins? Oh yeah, let's go. Keivin, you're great to kick off, please. Yes.
Sorry, I was just gonna
You're
say,
good.
I would say practice your behavioral base interviewing. So what that means is, so a lot of the questions are going to be framed about what you've done. So we need to really get an understanding of how you behave in certain situations. So it's called the STAR method. So you want to state the situation, what's the task that you did, what actions did you take, and then what was the results. I usually add a T, so the START method. Really, so if your results wasn't what you thought it was in that situation, then what was your takeaways and what did you learn from it? So if you stick to that framework and answering your interview questions, you would ace the interview pretty well.
That is such an actionable takeaway. Thank you. I love that so much.
I know that was so tactical. I love it. I also volunteer with the campus recruiting team with the University of Minnesota. So what I see differentiates candidates is sharing your passions about DEI or your passions and values, and how that connects with Cummins's culture and values is really important. Especially, I think, yes, technical skills are also very important, but I think at Cummins we do value our culture a lot and the people. So kind of showcasing that you are also really passionate about it, or you're willing to learn, and these are the things that you might have been lacking or you didn't know in the past, but this is how you grew. I think those would be like really great examples to showcase who you are and how you can connect with Cummins.
Awesome. Well, we are at time. What a power hour. This was so wonderful. Keivin, Seoyeon, thank you so much for making the time, for being radically vulnerable with us, and your candor and your kindness. I really appreciate both of you. I hope we get to do this again. And we dropped it in earlier, but what's the best way to stay connected with both of you? Is it LinkedIn?
Yep, LinkedIn.
Great. Awesome. Same. I'll see you on the LinkedIn. All right, friends. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who participated. Your questions, your comments, your participation really makes this hour possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will see you at the next one. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.